Welcome to SYNC-O-WICZ, hosted by the fearless Linda SYNC-O-WICZ. She's syncing you up with the latest in election integrity, from breaking headlines to critical updates you won't hear anywhere else. With Linda, it's facts first as she leads the fight for one vote for one legal voter. Stay informed, stay empowered. Let's jump in.
Hi, and welcome to SYNC-O-WICZ. I'm Linda SYNC-O-WICZ, the founder and CEO of Fight Voter Fraud. You're watching us on OBBM Network TV. So our rundown for this week, our guest is Jefferson E. Davis. He will be coming up very shortly. And then the states that we're going to talk about this week: Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, New York. Then we'll have our election and voting terms. We'll go to our trivia question, national news, and then our vote notes. And as you know, our vote notes is a longer story that you're going to need to click on the link on our website to read the rest of it. So without much further ado, let's go to Jefferson E. Davis.
Good morning.
Welcome. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming on. You are from Wisconsin.
I am.
So why don't you tell us about what your organization has been doing as far as election integrity?
So after the 2020 election in Wisconsin, the presidential election, we thought, okay, anecdotally and just common sense, something didn't make sense. Wisconsin was decided by 20,682 votes. And we're like, okay, how is it possible that President Trump in a state like Wisconsin, against a candidate like he was running against, how did he lose in the middle of the night a state that he had won 4 years earlier, lost by 20,682.
I was going to say, I know. I'll let you explain.
Yeah, I bet you do know. And so what we did is we just kind of sat on our hands for 10 months because we thought, Linda, that the legislature, we thought law enforcement, we thought the legal system, we thought the Republican Party would do the right thing and get to the bottom of all of the evidence that was coming out that question why the 10 electoral college votes were certified in Wisconsin the way they were. Well, fast forward from November of 2020 to August of 2021. On the west side of the Capitol in Madison, we had an election integrity rally, and the retired Milwaukee County law enforcement sheriff, David Clark, had an election integrity rally. Linda, we probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000, 2,500 people, beautiful optics. The background was the Capitol, beautiful flag, big music presentation, yard signs, wonderful speakers, legislators. But now we're 10 months into this after the election. And a bunch of us afterwards said, do you think anything's going to get done? And we collectively said no. So what we did is we immediately reached out to all 72 counties, the Republican Party county chairman and their executive committees. We brought in experts from cyber, data, legal, financial, and administrative. In those 5 capacities, we sat down and we put a plan together. And we said, there is no way that President Trump lost Wisconsin by 20,682. So we formed a statewide election integrity ad hoc committee for that purpose at that time, from those 5 perspectives: cyber, legal, data, financial, and administrative. And then we branched out to get the 72 county chairmen and their executive committees to consider passing a resolution supporting us looking at those 5 areas to see what really happened. And 66 of the 72 counties said, yeah, we're in. So then what we did, Linda, is we sat down and we identified 78 different daily activities of administering elections in Wisconsin from 5 perspectives. What's the issue? Under what administrative code, state statute does it fall under? Under whose auspices does it fall under? What's the status of that issue? And how can we get the 72 counties and the thousands of people across Wisconsin to buy in to help us monitor that and get something done? And we did it from three perspectives: what has been done and needs to be monitored, what is being done and needs to be followed through with, and what has to be done. So when you look at that backstory from those three perspectives, cyber, data, legal, financial, and administrative, what has been done, what is being done, what needs to be done, and then the 5 areas that we went to: law enforcement, the legislature, the legal system, lobbying, and then logistically, what does that look like? We can fast forward to 4 years later. And here's what it comes down to in Wisconsin. And I don't think we're unique in this consideration at all. Wisconsin has a database called SYNC-O-WICZ. And Linda, following you for as long as I have and as intuitive as you are, you understand HAVA, Help America Vote Act, that specifically says voter rolls in all 50 states can only have eligible registered voters. They have to be vetted. Well, we looked at that and we said, okay, this can't be happening in Wisconsin. I'm a lifelong resident of Wisconsin. I didn't know any of this 4 years ago. I'm a sole proprietor, small businessman. And when I looked into this, my wife said, you know, honey, they're going to come after you the closer you get to the truth. And I said, well, so what? Because if we don't have our constitutional representative republic, we don't have anything. And so what we found out was this, Linda, and this is astonishing to me, but we're getting really close to cracking it wide open, we think. So we bought the database, and currently there's 8.2 million names in the SYNC-O-WICZ database. And people go, wait a minute, that's the size of the whole area of New York. And we go, yes. And they go, well, that many people don't live in Wisconsin, do they? And I go, no, we only have 5.8 million residents. And that might be skewed because we counted people that are here illegally in the census. So that might even be a skewed number. So then we went a little deeper and we said, okay, how many of the 5.8 million are age 18 or older, which would be VAP, voting age population, that could be registered to vote? Linda, that number came down to 4.6 million. And then we said, okay, well, how many are actually registered to vote that are eligible? Well, that number dropped down to 3.6. So then the first question you ask is, okay, if there's only 3.6 million registered, eligible in Wisconsin, we call them electors, not voters, then why do we have 8.2 million or an extra 4.6 million names in this database? Just a one-word question. Why? Well, here's what we found out, Linda. You can move, if you can hack the SYNC-O-WICZ database, which we're told it's very easy to hack into, you can move the 4.6 million names over to the 3.6 million names invisibly. And unless you're a professional, you have no idea who's doing it or how they're doing it. And so we looked into that, and we could see just before the election, like 30 days out, and then the day of the election, there would be an influx of 7, 8, 9, 10% new voters. And we're like, Wisconsin's not that big of a state. We don't have that many people. Well, then mysteriously, a few months afterwards, those extra 200,000 or 300,000 would mysteriously drop off. And so we would go from 3.6 to 3.8. And then we would drop back down to 3.6 shortly afterwards in the next year. And we're like, how is this happening? Well, then we looked a little deeper, Linda. We found out in Wisconsin, we have what's called indefinitely confined. You're automatically mailed a ballot. We don't have mail-in ballots here in Wisconsin. Not everyone gets a mail-in ballot. It's just the indefinitely confined. Well, that number in 2020 exploded from 60,000 to 270,000. And 220,000 of them had a ballot cast and processed on their behalf. Well, Linda, you can win any election in Wisconsin if you have a pool of 270,000 names that a ballot, wink, wink, nod, nod, is mailed to and then returned and processed. And in 2020, that number went from 60,000 to 270, and 220,000 had a ballot processed for them. And Linda, literally no chain of custody. You don't have to show voter ID. In Wisconsin, we have voter ID, but the mail-in ballots don't have to show that. Number two, you have to sign a poll book in Wisconsin. The mail-in ballots don't have to sign a poll book, Linda. The witness to the mail-in ballot that comes back in an envelope, you're supposed to sign it as the elector and sign it as the witness. Linda, we don't have signature verification in Wisconsin. Now, I'm not suggesting anything other than what I've shared with you as evidence. But if you have a pool of 270,000 ballots that are automatically mailed a ballot and they come back into the tune of 220,000, Linda, you can win just about any election you want to because there's no verification, literally.
Right.
Then we looked a little deeper. And we found out, thanks to the Legislative Audit Bureau, 46,000 people registered to vote the day of the election in Wisconsin. And there's a process after the election that those registrations go through a vetting process with different state agencies, Social Security and the Department of Motor Vehicles, the federal and the state. We found out, Linda, 46,000 ballots were processed on the day of the election in November of 2020 that had missing statutory information. Linda, you can win any election in Wisconsin if you have an extra pool of 46,000 ballots because you can't go in and find them. It's a secret ballot in Wisconsin. So now you got 46,000 plus 220,000. Now we're up to 266,000, and it gets worse, Linda. We found out there were deceased people voting. We found out that there were felons that were voting. We found out that there were mentally incompetent people voting, not by the hundreds, not by the onesies and twosies, by the thousands. But the coup de grace was this. We had somewhere between 825 and 850,000 ballots that were put in these Mark Zuckerberg's illegal absentee ballot drop boxes with no verification whatsoever. 825,000 to 850,000. And Linda, we only had 4,270 absentee ballots out of 2 million that were rejected in 2020. Linda, you can win any election you want to in Wisconsin if you only have a 0.002 rejection rate for absentee ballots. So when you put the drop boxes, the mentally incompetent, the felons, the deceased, the same-day voter registration, and the indefinitely confined, Linda, we're approaching 1 million ballots in an election between President Trump and his Democrat opponent of 3.4 million. There was a 66% absentee ballot turnout in 2020 in a state decided by 20,682. So then
it's just incredible. All it keeps going through my head is Wanda the ballot stuffer from Connecticut would have been in heaven. With those drop boxes.
And you're
unbelievable.
You're so insightful. And that's what I was going to comment on very briefly. And thank you for steering me there before we switch over to the cyber component, which are the voting machines. So what we did here in Wisconsin, we worked very closely with True the Vote, Catherine Engelbrecht and Greg Phillips, who the federal government through lawfare and weaponization tried to destroy. Out of the goodness of their heart, Linda, and a very generous donor here in Wisconsin, they came here and they did a geospatial technology survey of those drop boxes just in 3 counties, and we have 72. And there were 573 drop boxes that Mark Zuckerberg put all over the state of Wisconsin. Linda, just in 3 counties, through a very sophisticated geospatial technology analysis, Greg and Catherine, just in 3 counties, found a minimum of 137,551 fake absentee ballots because of what you just said, because they were able to track the person's cell phone that went to those same boxes every day 2 weeks before the election and stuffed the ballot boxes.
Yep.
137,551. So
All right,
then,
so do I hear the thing that we need to get rid of drop boxes and we need to get rid of absentee ballots?
great. So you're so insightful. So what we did in Wisconsin is we got the Supreme Court to agree with us. But the new liberal Supreme Court gave the local communities the option of re-implementing them. So we went from 573 boxes down to 78. So we've minimized that considerably. We're not done there, but that's where we're at for the 2026 midterms.
Wow, that's
And
a
those
great start.
That's a great start. And those boxes were used in 2024, and President Trump still won Wisconsin by about 30,000 votes. Then the other thing is with the mail-in ballots, we've been able to get the 270,000 indefinitely confined down to about 130,000. So we've cut that almost in half. And then one thing that I forgot to mention that I need to for your listeners is we have to be part of ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center. In 2020, Linda, we had 232,000 people that we got a circuit court judge to say, hey, they don't live in Wisconsin, but they're still in the database. You cannot let them have a ballot. Well, 70,000 of the 232,000 got a ballot, and it was processed in a state won by 20. That number now, Linda, is down to 20,000 from 232. So we've made progress, but we're not quite, fully there. But I'm sorry to take that much time, but that's just Wisconsin, Linda. Imagine Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia and North Carolina. Imagine all of those states. What's going on there?
Oh, yes. I mean, unbelievable stuff. And I started thinking that Marley Hornick should do her stuff in Wisconsin as well, that she's done in New York. She actually has a lawsuit against Letitia James.
Good.
And the New York Election Commission. She's moving, that lawsuit is moving forward.
Good. And we should visit about that. Do we have like 2 more minutes?
I can give you 2 more minutes. Then I'm kicking you out.
Well, thank you. You're very generous and very kind. But this is a passion of ours because we'll never win another election if this continues. So the last thing that I briefly wanted to touch on, and Wisconsin is unique in this case, is we took a deep dive in the cyber component. So cyber, legal, financial, administrative, and data. So we addressed the data with the WISC vote. Now the cyber. Wisconsin, we can vote, and we have 852 communities. All but 126 of them can vote to get rid of the cyber machines. And we can get rid of them. And you've probably seen the stuff that's been coming out lately with Lara Logan and the retired CIA whistleblower. It's enough to make your hair hurt. And so I just want your listeners and the viewers to know that that's the next thing that we're going to work very diligently here on Wisconsin. And we'd be happy to share that with your viewers.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I need to have you come back on in the near future, not months from now.
Right.
But after the new year, we definitely have to have you come back on to fill in more information because you're a wealth of information.
Well,
and thank you
so
much for everything you're doing. And we've got to go to a quick break and then we'll be right back.
At Fight Voter Fraud, we work to ensure every legal vote is counted and no unlawful vote ever diminishes the voice of we the people. We're fighting for you in courtrooms and communities nationwide to protect transparency, accountability, and fairness in every election. Our mission is simple: one vote for one legal voter. This is our country. This is our vote. Let's protect it together.
Hi, and welcome back to SYNC-O-WICZ. I'm Linda SYNC-O-WICZ, and our guest was phenomenal. Jefferson E. Davis talking about Wisconsin. And I'm serious, I will be having him back hopefully in January to give us more information on what's going on in Wisconsin. So the first state we're going to go to this week is Colorado. The source is Denver 7 ABC. This is from December 4th, 2025. Colorado could be the next as the Department of Justice sues states over access to voter registration lists. The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice asked the Secretary of State's office to enter into an agreement to share unredacted voter data like a full voter's name, date of birth, residential address, state driver's license number, or the last four digits of the Social Security number. Now, this is the same thing that all the states are being asked to share the information. Well, quote, the recent request by the Civil Rights Division for state voter rolls is pursuant to that statutory authority, and the responsive data is being screened for ineligible entries, a spokesman for the Department of Justice said in a statement. Now, the Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, isn't agreeing to give the information up. Of course. Quote, to be very clear, the Department of Justice and Donald Trump have no legal right to this information, and so I told them politely to go take a hike, unquote, Griswold said. She also said the Department of Justice has no legal right to ask for this information. However, the Department of Justice said in part, quote, Congress gave the Justice Department authority over the NVRA, which is the National Voter Registration Act, HAVA, which is a Help America Vote Act, the Civil Rights Act, and other statutes to ensure that states have proper voter registration procedures and programs to maintain clean voter rolls containing only eligible voters in federal elections, unquote. Now, there's 14 states that have already been sued by the Department of Justice. So Colorado's Secretary of State says they already have secure elections. I'm sorry. You got to laugh when they say that. No, you don't. And besides, you guys need to release Tina Peters. Tina Peters needs to be released from jail. Okay, now we're going to go to Florida. Florida, this is from the Florida Department of State, and this was on December 3rd, 2025. Secretary of State Cord Bird announces landmark agreement with DHS to better secure elections. Colorado, Florida. I mean, the big difference just between that is incredible. So now I'll actually tell you the story in Florida. In October 2024, Florida sued the Biden administration to receive better information from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Systematic Alien Verification of Entitlements, which is the SAVE database. A multi-state agreement was signed on November 28, 2025. Notice Florida sued the Biden administration, and now there's an agreement actually signed by the Trump administration. I'm sure you already saw that connection. All right, so on November 28th, with the Department of Homeland Security giving the states free and better information from the SAVE database, quote, Florida successfully led this multi-state effort to help secure accurate voter rolls, unquote, said the Secretary of State, Cord Bird. Quote, election integrity starts with clean voter rolls, and an important agreement will improve and modernize the SAVE database for decades to come, unquote. Now, the agreement requires DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, to offer SAVE at no cost, improve search functionality by adding the ability to search full or partial Social Security numbers, provide 48-hour response time, a government agency with a 48-hour response time? We like that. and process bulk requests. The agreement is judicially enforceable for 20 years, requiring future administrations to abide by it. Oh, go Trump administration. So Ohio, Indiana, and Iowa had joined Florida to settle the case. So, hey. SAVE is an online service administered by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, that's the USCIS, to verify immigration status and U.S. citizenship of applicants seeking benefits or licenses. The USCIS is part of the Department of Homeland Security. And the agreement was formally approved this past week. Yay! Yay. That's taking the driver's seat and trying to get illegals off the voter rolls. Yes, I said illegals because they're illegal. Georgia is our next state, and this is from the Union Bulletin, and this was from December 4th, 2025. Advocacy groups challenge Georgia election law in federal court. A federal judge on Wednesday considered whether to dismiss a lawsuit challenging provisions of the 2024 state election law that changed where homeless voters could receive election mail and strengthened the ability of activists to challenge the eligibility of voters. The consolidated suit seeks to overturn that voter eligibility challenge law, which has further empowered, oh, love this, conservative activists who have lodged more than 100,000 registration challenges since 2021. County election boards have rejected most of those efforts. The law allows county residents to file voter eligibility challenges when county elections boards if a voter registers in another state at a non-residential address and claims a homestead exemption in another jurisdiction. Now, the federal court judge, Stephen D. Grimberg, asked whether the advocacy groups bringing the suit have constituents who have been directly affected by the eligibility challenge provisions in Senate Bill 189. Yes, if you're not supposed to be voting in Georgia, you are affecting the constituents, not the other way around. Oh my goodness. So advocacy groups in the suits argue that voter challenges have required them to expend money and volunteer time protecting eligible voters. But Greenberg questions whether the advocacy groups need to divert their resources to monitor voter challenges, saying that's their choice. The groups in the consolidated suit argue that provisions in SB 189 violate the National Voter Registration Act, which only allows the cancellation of a voter's registration after that voter confirms in writing that they've moved or fails to respond to official notice about the address from the county election officials and misses the next two general elections. We're going to have to watch and see the outcome of this one. This is crazy. Not everybody goes and lets their election officials know when they've moved. People just think automatically somebody else is going to do it for them. Well, you know what? They're not. So if you move, make sure you let your former election office know, and make sure you go and register to vote in your new state, county, town, or wherever you end up registering. We want you to be registered to vote only where you actually live. Okay? Thank you. Michigan. This is from the Geller Report from December 2nd, 2025. And this particular story was from my friend Lou from Virginia. So thank you so much for forwarding this on as soon as you saw it. Large-scale voter fraud rocks Michigan. There's a surprise. Serious questions are mounting in Michigan as state lawmakers raise alarms over what they describe as large-scale voter registration irregularities, including tens of thousands of new registrations flagged with invalid Social Security numbers and a voter roll that reportedly exceeds the state's adult population by roughly 500,000 names. Weren't we just talking about Wisconsin? Wisconsin at the beginning of the show with Jefferson E. Davis was talking about this. Michigan, you've got a big problem. Well, we knew that. So Senator Johnson has publicly warned that Michigan's election system is, quote, wide open for abuse, pointing directly to HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, or the Help America Vote Verification System, the HAVV. The database intended to confirm the accuracy of voter registration information. According to Johnson, roughly 100,000 people registered to vote in Michigan last year, and 36% of them, that's about 36,000 applicants, submitted invalid 4-digit Social Security number matches, yet were still allowed to complete the registrations. Quote, this should never happen, unquote, he said. Quote, if those numbers cannot be verified, the registration should not go through, period. End of quote. No kidding. Johnson also claims Michigan's voter roll now contains around 500,000 more registered voters than the state has voting age adults, raising renewed concerns about non-citizen registrations, outdated rolls, and potential systematic vulnerabilities. As usual, lots going on in the state of Michigan. And remember, their Secretary of State, who's in charge of this stuff, who's in charge of overseeing this, is running for governor. Haven't screwed up enough stuff already in the state? You only did one segment. Now, if you become governor, that way you can screw everything up. Unbelievable. Did I just say that? I'll tell you, it's been one of those days. I mean, one of those days, one of those mornings. It has just been wow. Okay, next state is New York. New York, the New York State Senate, December 3rd, 2025. Oh my God. Okay, you already know where this story's going to go. This story is so ridiculous. I got to tell you that this is absolutely so ridiculous. You know, this is coming from the New York State Senate. Okay, so Harkham and Dinowitz introduced a bill to protect residents from civil arrest at polling places. Now, the New York State Senator Pete Harkham and Assemblyman Jefferson Dinowitz introduced legislation that will protect residents from civil arrest while going to, remaining at, or returning from polling places in New York. Civil arrests supported by a judicial warrant or court order will still be allowed under this new bill. However, the new bill was prompted by the numerous extrajudicial arrests being made by U.S. immigration and custom enforcement agents around the country. Those arrests in homes, workplaces, schools, college campuses, and immigration courts, along with traffic stops on roadways, have included citizens and non-citizens alike. No, non-citizens, illegals, green card holders, asylum seekers, illegals, children, some held incommunicado for days. before I give the rest of my comments, I better just finish this story because I got a few comments. Quote, to maintain lawful access to polling places during our free elections in New York. This is a state that just voted in a mayor who's a communist in New York City. Okay. The free election. Okay. Our residents need to be assured that they will be protected from civil arrest while exercising their right to vote. I got to stop it there for a second. If you're illegal, you're not allowed to vote. So basically, this law is being put out there to protect illegals while they were at the polling stations voting illegally. I mean, this is absurd. So the rest of their quote is the right to vote is guaranteed by Article 2 in the state constitution, said Harkman. Quote, it's too easy to see that efforts to conduct these arrests at polling places without warrant simply are intimidation tactics aimed at disenfranchising voters, unquote. They're trying to pass another law to protect illegals at the polling stations, in the polling stations, when they're leaving, when they're going there. And these include murderers and rapists and everybody else. But boy, New York, you know, just when you think you couldn't get any worse than your Attorney General, Letitia James, excuse me, you now have two Democrats pushing forward a bill to protect illegals while they are illegally voting in the elections. Just in case you didn't get that part, I thought I'd explain it to you. That has got to be one of the most ridiculous stories we've had in a while. Okay. Shake it off. Got to shake it off. Okay. Now we're going to go on to our election and voting terms. Our word for the week is electoral college. The voters or electors of each state that formally elect the United States president and vice president. Each state has as many electoral college votes as it does U.S. representatives and U.S. senators in Congress. I never knew that. So I hope I educated a few people with that. So now we are going to go to our trivia question of the week. Let's see if I can find it here. Just hang on a second. I will find it. I had it earlier. Not that I've got lots of papers. Tim, we're going to have to give me just a couple more minutes here. If I can't find it, this is crazy. I had it. What did I do with it? I probably have it in a very simple spot. Oh my goodness. Oh no. I found it. Here it is. After we went through all of these. Oh my goodness. I told you it's been one of those days. Okay. The trivia question of the week. Although George Washington was unanimously elected president in the first ever election in 1788, 1789, what state was not part of the Electoral College for that election, since it did not establish how to choose its electors for the Electoral College by the deadline of January 7th, 1789. We're going to go to a quick break and we'll be right back.
We need your help to ensure one vote for one legal voter. Join Fight Voter Fraud. Request training, get the potential double-registered, double voter data for your town, and donate to support the fight. Visit fightvoterfraud.org, because election integrity starts with you.
Hi, and welcome back to SYNC-O-WICZ. Before we left for break, I was looking for my trivia questions. And you know what? I actually have 2 copies. It took me all that time to find it. All right, so our trivia question, although George Washington was unanimously elected president in the first ever election in 1788 to 89, what state was not part of the Electoral College for that election, since it did not establish how to choose its electors for the Electoral College by the deadline of January 7th, 1789? New York. It must have had those 2 senators we were talking about earlier. Okay. Now we're going to go on to national news. National news. It's from the Sentinel from December 4th, 2025. Department of Homeland Security now investigating Coldwater Mayor Ceballos for election fraud and perjury. Now, you know, we've spoken about this particular mayor before, but we're giving you this update with the Department of Justice that has gotten involved. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has joined the investigation of Coldwater Mayor Jose Ceballos on charges that he committed voter fraud and perjury by claiming to be a U.S. citizen and voting in elections for the past quarter century. His attorney said his client possessed a green card and he was considered a permanent resident. Ceballos won his second term. Notice he won his second term on November 4th as mayor of the Comanche County town, only to be arrested the next day by Kansas authorities and charged with 6 felonies, 3 for voting illegally and 3 for perjury. DHS has provided documentation of the alleged crime showing he claimed to be a U.S. citizen on a 1999 voter registration form, then signed the form under penalty of perjury. I'm going to tell you, the article also has pictures of the documents, and Ceballos' attorney, Jess Homey, told the Topeka Capital Journal that Ceballos, who is now 55, came to the U.S. as a 4-year-old with his stepfather and eventually settled in Coldwater. Now, Ceballos applied for U.S. citizenship in February of this year. That's like 26 years later. Okay, he did not believe in any way that he was committing a crime. If he had known it was illegal to vote, he never would have voted, Homey said. And he was a mayor there already. DHS also revealed he was convicted of battery in 1995. Tricia McLaughlin is the spokesperson for DHS. Quote, the illegal alien, committed a felony by voting in American elections. If convicted, he'll be placed in removal proceedings. President Trump and Secretary Noem gave states access to the SAVE, which is the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements program, to ensure that only Americans vote in American elections. The SAVE program is a critical tool for states and local governments to safeguard the integrity of elections across the country. Our elections belong to the American citizens, not foreign citizens, unquote, or illegals. We'll continue to follow this story, but I believe he had won by like 85% in that county as the mayor. Unbelievable. Now we're going to go to vote notes. Vote notes. Look at this. It's from Fight Voter Fraud, Inc. from December 2nd, 2025. Observations and solutions for election integrity and accurate voter rolls for Connecticut. Key issues with solutions. Now, this is the information that I put together on behalf of my organization, Fight Voter Fraud, for a meeting I had on December 2nd with the Secretary of State here in Connecticut. I put together 15 issues, and with those issues with the elections, I also offered solutions. And believe it or not, even though this meeting was like 7 years in the making, because that's how long I've been involved with Fight Voter Fraud and could never get a meeting, with our Secretary of State, even though it's changed a few years ago. Nobody wanted to talk to me. But this time, she actually did. And the way I got her attention, and I've been telling everybody this, is that I actually sent an email after talking to my assistant, Tim. I love Tim. Tim is great. I bounce ideas off of him, even when he's not awake enough in the morning. And he first comes in, he definitely needs more coffee when he comes in here. And we sit and talk about stuff from the day before and stuff for the day going forward. And I had mentioned about our expose that we had done on Connecticut registrars, which are our election officials here in Connecticut, one Republican and one Democrat in each 169 towns. And yes, we vote by town. We do not vote by county. And all the issues that I had found, and this is from last year, and this stuff's been sitting there. The state election enforcement said, no, it's not worth looking into, even though at least 40 towns in Connecticut could not legally run the elections in 2024. So the way I got her attention, and thank you again, Secretary of State Stephanie Thomas, I sent an email entitled Olive Branch Outreach. I said, Secretary Thomas, I would like to meet with you to discuss some election integrity ideas and things I've observed. Believe it or not, 10 minutes later, I got an email, although snarky, which I was really happy that she returned the email so promptly, saying yes, she would meet with me. And she said it's a lot better for a phone call or in person instead of having FOIs, which is freedom of information that wastes taxpayer dollars. Just for your information, every freedom of information that I requested from the Secretary of State in Connecticut was never fulfilled. But anyway, I digress. So going from my vote notes into my final thoughts, I'm kind of leading this in. The vote notes, again, you'll find that on our website. You can click on the link. I have all 15 of the issues on there. So when I met with her and the number 2 person, they were gracious, and we had an excellent conversation, much to my surprise. And one of the things I kept saying was that in the beginning is I am not the person you think I am, with all the lies that are out there in the newspapers and some nefarious people saying stuff about myself and my organization that are not true at all. And we just don't even respond to those. Because I told her all we want to do is have one vote for one legal voter. That's it. And believe it or not, she actually agreed with 90%, if not more, of what I brought forward. So I am hoping when we agreed to work together that it will come to fruition. Granted, the meeting was only a week ago. But yeah, I think we have one baby step moving forward. And one of the things that I realized is that I've changed a lot since I first started 7 years ago. I've changed in the last couple of years, more so even in the last 6 months, on how I look at things and taking a step back, seeing where people are coming from, but still standing up for what I believe is right. And one of my suggestions to people who are trying to get things done is that don't come out with the fists, and trying to find some common ground. Now, the issues I brought forward were not my big issues. They were smaller issues, but they all affect the elections. Because as most of you know, I do not believe in drop boxes at all. I actually believe in clean voter rolls. I believe in election officials actually doing their jobs. I believe in oversight for our elections. I don't believe in absentee ballots, except for the very, very few outside of the military and those who are outside of the country. We need to vote in person. We need to show ID. You can't go to a pharmacy and ask for Sudafed without having to show your freaking ID. The most important thing we have that is equal for every single person in this country that is a U.S. citizen is our right to vote. Not the right for illegals, and not the rights that some of these leftist organizations are constantly saying, oh, you got to be fair to everybody. No, we need to be fair to U.S. citizens. My vote should count just as much as your vote. I don't care who you are. I don't care what party you're from. It doesn't matter. We all need to exercise our right to vote only once from where you're supposed to vote, because that is what our republic is about. We're a constitutional republic. That's what it's about. Your voice should count just as much as my voice. Although sometimes I think I can talk a lot louder than some people, some stuff that I say. Like I said, it's been one of those days. I want to thank everyone for watching OBBM Network TV. I'm Linda SYNC-O-WICZ. The goal of our program is to educate listeners on election integrity and things that you can do yourself right in your own community. So thank you again for watching us on OBBM Network TV, YouTube, Rumble. If you want to get in touch with us, send an email to info@fightvoterfraud.org. And if you get a chance, make a donation to us so we can keep moving forward. Thank you so much.